Hello, and welcome to the course Jews and Christians in Capernaum, from the time of Jesus to the time of Justinian. My name is Dr. Walden Serafisi, and I'm a researcher currently at Lund University. I've been at Lund now just for a few months. I just recently transitioned from a previous job to now to living in Sweden. And I'm very thankful to be at Lund University because of its great tradition of studying the relationship between Judaism and Christianity from the time of the New Testament all the way through even to the contemporary period. So, and that's what this course is really all about. We're going to maybe not go so much into the contemporary world, but this course is really an opportunity for you history lovers and the lovers of the New Testament as well to think about Jewish-Christian interaction from a number of different ways. So Capernaum is a unique site in that it holds a special place in the history of Judaism and Christianity. There's no other site. So when we talk about Capernaum, it's actually a real place that you can go to today, right? Some of you maybe have been there, but it's an archaeological park that you can go to in Israel. It's right on the shore of, right off the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee, Kinneret Lake. But no other site in all of Israel, and really all of any location having to do with biblical history, has an equal amount of information and evidence and data having to do with both the history of Jews and Judaism and also Christianity. If you go to Capernaum today, you'll see a sign that has been put up by the Franciscan Custodia Terra Sancta. Those are the custodians of the Holy Land who currently run the site. And it'll say, Capernaum, the town of Jesus, right? And so it, of course, working with the idea that in the gospel stories from the New Testament, Jesus is portrayed as actually living in Capernaum. He gets kicked out of Nazareth, his hometown, but then he comes over to Capernaum, not too far away, and he sets up shop with his disciples, and Capernaum really becomes a hub for a lot of the ministry that he does in the Galilee. But it's a hugely important site, not just for Jesus and his disciples 2,000 years ago, but also today for Christian pilgrims. So Capernaum is flooded on a daily basis with those who consider Capernaum really a holy site, a place where the memory of Jesus and also, more specifically, the Apostle Peter spent a significant amount of time. So we'll have lots of opportunities to talk about this, but at Capernaum, especially important for a lot of Christian pilgrims today, is the so-called House of St. Peter, right? That has been memorialized for centuries and centuries and centuries, but currently has an interesting modern church built over top of it, but that commemorates the remembered site of the house of the chief of the apostles. That's Apostle Peter. The archaeological park stretches a lot of history, as I mentioned, both for Jews and for Christians. Probably about 7 centuries or so of Jewish history, maybe even more than that, depending on how you break the time period up. But then probably 12 or so centuries of Christian history. So, I mean, there are some parts of Capernaum that go all the way back to the Bronze Age. So that's, way back. But then there's lots of information, lots of material that goes, especially from the Hellenistic period, from around the time of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BCE, but then probably after that, all the way through until the 7th century with the rise of Islam in Palestine. But then 12 centuries of Christianity, because Capernaum is also home to some Crusader material as well. So the Crusaders set up shop in Capernaum, and there's some Crusader remains there as well. So all of this is to say is that for those of you who are interested not just in the New Testament itself, and of course the really interesting narratives that surround Jesus in Capernaum, and then of course the 1st century material that relates to the site, but for those of you who are interested in the relationship between Jews and Christians in one location over the course of many centuries, this is going to be the course for you. Capernaum is on the northwest shore of the Lake of Galilee, like I mentioned. And what this course is really going to do is have two kind of starting points, okay? I mentioned, and I think in the course title, it's from Jesus to Justinian, or basically from around the early 1st century to the 6th century. But really, we'll need to stretch a little bit before the time of Jesus, and then also a little bit after the time of Justinian. So the starting point really is around the start of the Roman conquest of the land of Israel. So that would be in 63 or so BCE. That's the start of the early Roman period. And then the ending point is this transition period from the Byzantine rule of Palestine to the Islamic transition in about 640 or so CE. So that's the 7th century. Justinian, who sort of the person or the individual that we kind of cap our timeline on, is around 527 or so CE. So we're going to stretch. We're going to cover a bunch of historical terrain in this class. I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be fast, okay? But you'll have this, of course, as a recording that you'll be able to return to over as many times as you want. So buckle up and get ready to, with me, address around 5 or 6, I think, maybe even a little bit more, historical questions, okay, that we're going to be exploring in this class, okay? The first one is, what was everyday life like in Capernaum during the time of Jesus? Anybody interested in interpreting the New Testament, especially the gospel narratives about Jesus, and if you're interested in historical Jesus and some of those kinds of questions, the first step is almost always, right, to try to get at context, right? Social, historical, cultural context. When Jesus comes to Capernaum, what's he coming into, right? What's it like there? Who's there? We're going to be particularly interested in the socioeconomic questions that surround Capernaum. Was it a wealthy village? Was it a poor village? Were there powerful people there? Were there just average, everyday village peasants there? Who can we expect Jesus to be engaging with when he calls his disciples, right? Peter and the sons, Peter and Andrew and the sons of Zebedee. What's their association with Capernaum like, especially coming from the fishing industry? That's something that we'll talk quite a bit about. And so all of these, I hope, especially as it relates to this question of everyday life, will help illuminate your New Testaments just a bit more. The second question hopefully will also do this, but it's also a stage setter for the later questions that we'll ask. But the question is, what was there really a synagogue from the time of Jesus in Capernaum? The gospel narratives seem to suggest that's true, but recently archaeologists have suggested that there's no evidence at all that a synagogue building from the time of Jesus actually existed. Instead, this building here that you can see right on the right side of your screen is a white limestone building that's part of a white limestone synagogue from late antiquity, dated probably somewhere in the 5th or 6th century CE. That's actually the first synagogue that was ever built in Capernaum, and that there was nothing from the time of Jesus. So who's right? Who's right and who's wrong there? So it's a real historical question that we need to get at, because when we envision Jesus in a synagogue or not, it impacts the way that we understand what his own ministry, his own self-conception of what he was doing as he preaches about the kingdom of God. And it also impacts the way that we see the growth of the Jesus movement and the institutional context of the growth of the Jesus movement and the development of Judaism and Christianity in this particular place over the course of centuries. The next question is, did Jewish believers in Jesus live in Capernaum after the time of Jesus? So this is when we'll get into a period of time that's slightly after the New Testament. We'll focus on the 2nd and 3rd centuries. And this is when we'll get to touch on topics like reception history. How did memories of Jesus in this place develop and show themselves both in literary sources and also in archaeology? This is when we'll start to talk more about the archaeology of the earliest forms of Christ belief in Capernaum. It also will touch on this so-called partings of the ways idea that is often talked about in scholarship. When did Judaism or sorry, maybe I should rephrase that. When did Christianity become non-Jewish? Okay, so when did Christians stop being Jewish is sort of the question to that. And of course, it's a very complex question, impossible to answer really with a sort of one sort of blanket answer. But the interesting thing about, I think, this question is that we're going to study the relationship between Judaism and Christianity on a local level in one place. Okay, well, lots of stuff is happening in the Roman world in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, especially as Christianity develops and as Judaism develops too. But we're going to focus especially on a local level about how these two came to fruition. Then we'll ask, how and why did the house of St. Peter, or at least the remembered house of St. Peter, transform from a domus ecclesia, so-called house church, into what we see today, right, as a sort of Byzantine commemorative church? So we're interested in something that happens in the late 4th century and then into the 5th century, about how this structure that was remembered as Peter's house went from being a house to being a proper monumental church. But now, not just the architectural and material elements of that change. I'm also interested, and I think we will be interested, in what that change says about Jewish-Christian relations. The next question will be, who built Capernaum's limestone synagogue? So the building that you're looking at right there, in your right below the text, is that's the white limestone synagogue. There are lots of different theories about who actually built it. It's not so straightforward as saying, well, didn't Jewish people do it? No, well, maybe. Sort of the dynamics, the socioeconomic dynamics around who built it and who funded the building are quite interesting, and also have a direct role to play in the way that we think about Jewish-Christian relations in 6th century Capernaum. Okay, so as we get a little bit later in time.
What Bible do you read? And how do you know it's the right one?
There's only one version of the Bible, right?
It might surprise you to learn that Bible translations led to many versions of Holy Scripture. Long ago, translators interpreted the Hebrew Bible, ensuring it would be enjoyed in many languages. But when they encountered Hebrew words they didn't understand, translators relied on their individual cultural context and used different words with different meanings unrelated to the original ones. This led to Bible versions that lacked the full, beautiful, original explanations becoming part of our history. That's why when you join our online classes, you'll get back to the source of the original Hebrew Bible to uncover hidden meanings.
Get back to the source. Join our online course today, where the treasures of the authentic Bible await you.
Click on the link and register to start your biblical experience.